It's the Blues Rock Show with Pete Francis and Willie Witten.
Welcome to the Blues Rock Show. I'm Pete Francis, joined by Willie Witten. Make sure to hit that subscribe button and the notification bell to get all the latest updates. Make sure to hit that like button. Really helps us out with YouTube's algorithm. We definitely appreciate it. All right, Willie. So we just released the top 20 albums of 2020 on Blues Rock Review. Joe Bonamassa's Royalty is voted number one. And if you're not familiar with how we get the number one album and how we get the top 20 albums, it comes down to a vote. And the vote is 50% from the staff, so people like you and me. And then the other 50% is the fans. So Joe gets number one. What are your thoughts on the list? What are your thoughts on Joe getting number one?
I think Joe getting number one is well within reason. I love the album. It was not my number one album, but it was in my top four album. So you can guess it. I would have said top five. He was my number four pick. But quite honestly, I thought it was an awesome album. I really do. I think it is different from his other albums, which is great. He continues to do that. He continues to try some different angles and different things. I think it's a great pick for number one. Really, for me, I thought that there were a couple tiers of albums. In my mind, I had a tough time deciding between four albums for number one. There were four albums this year that stood out in my mind that were sort of a cut above, maybe is a way to say it. I thought they were Joe Bonamassa's Royalty. I thought we had Walter Trout's Ordinary Madness. I thought the Allman Betts Band, Bless Your Heart. And I also liked Philip Say's Spirit Rising. Those four to me were just a slight cut above the rest. My order was I had Sace, Allman Betts, Walter, and then Joe. But really, you can make a case for any of those. And I'm sure there are people out there who are watching. Pete, you may disagree. There's no reason why really any of the albums in the top 10, I think you can make a case for. I thought these four were the strongest. I don't know. Pete, did you have Joe number one? Who was your number one?
So I think having Joe at number one was a good choice.
Okay.
And I think because I think this is his best album since probably Driving Towards the Daylight.
Okay.
I think his last couple albums, while they were pretty good, I don't think they were as good as some of his albums that he's put out. For me personally, I still think The Ballad of John Henry is his best album.
Okay.
I think that's kind of where it starts with Joe. I really like Driving Towards the Daylight, but I really like Royalty. I think it's his best since Driving Towards the Daylight. So I have no issue with Joe getting number one. Obviously, he did really well in the fan vote and the staff vote. Really liked Philip Sayce's Spirit Rising. I think that was a fantastic album. I really like the track Black Ruler Coming. He's got so many great tracks on this album. I think it's a very inspired album. And I think more people need to hear it. I think Philip did a great job on that album. As you mentioned, Walter Trout put out a great album this year, very high on the list. Allman Betts Band. Allman Betts Band, this is only their second album, Bless Your Heart. This did very well in both the fan voting and the staff vote. So really, I don't have too many issues there at the top. Like you said, there's about 5 to 6 maybe albums, maybe top 10. You could kind of shuffle them around, but I think in general, I think the list did a pretty good job of getting most of them. And I think the order is pretty good too. As far as the top 20, there's always albums that are going to get in, and then there's albums that get left out. So Willie, what are some albums that you think maybe didn't get in this year that you thought maybe should have?
Right off the bat, one that I'm going to say, especially when we're talking about top 20, I'm going to say the Heavy Eyes, Love Like Machines.
And they've made the top 20 before.
Right. And I think that for those unfamiliar with them, when we talk about blues rock, they start to drift into that avenue, not drift, but purposefully drive, I think is the better word, into the avenue of almost old Black Sabbath.
They're very heavy.
Yes, exactly.
They've got a lot of crunching riffs.
Very much so. And the crunching riffs is one of the parallels with a Black Sabbath type band. I also think they have some stories, whereas when we look at a lot of the blues artists, they're talking about their life. They're talking about someone else's life, but a lot of it's framed in reality. The Heavy Eyes, what I like is I don't know where they're getting these ideas from, but they have all sorts of songs that are out there. They are songs that are made up stories. They're really enjoyable. Like you said, I love the crunching riffs. They're in your face. They're memorable, which I really like. They don't do as much exposition so much on the guitar, the instrumentals. But when we talk about a couple songs, Goddamn the Wolfman is great. I love one of my favorites is A Cat Named Haku off that album. It has one of the best riffs of the year. I had them at number 5. Now, I know that this is all subjective, but it's surprising to me when I have someone that high, pretty much, not pretty much, but right under my top tier. I've got them there, and I don't even see them on the top 20. That sort of disappointed me. Pete, so that's just one.
Well, I think, Willie, I think with the Heavy Eyes, they've been on the top 20 before. I think it was a great album. I think maybe the issue is a lot of people just haven't heard that album this year. And I think maybe that's kind of what the issue with them was. Obviously, it was a great album. For me, there's a couple names that come to mind.
All right.
Eric Steckel put out an album this year, Grandview Drive. He's made the top 20 a few times before. Super, super talented young guitar player. Always puts out good stuff. So I think his album definitely could have landed a spot. Kirk Fletcher, My Blues Pathway, very good blues album. Kirk Fletcher, one of the top blues guitarists out there. He put out a great album this year. Another one that I really enjoyed was John Fusco's album.
Okay.
And that was a double album. And he's just a really interesting, strong songwriter. And I thought that album kind of deserved a little bit more love. But yeah, this year, I mean, this list every year, Willie, it's super, super tough to crack. And it's really competitive. And once you get past that top 10 too, it's almost like there's so many albums that you could just substitute in.
Sure.
And no one would really notice the difference, really. I mean, it's just really tough to get into that top 20 because there's really 35 to 40 albums potentially that are really deserving of it.
Yeah, I agree. And I think some of it does come down to the back half of the top 20. Some of it, I agree with the idea about the Heavy Eyes, and I think you hit the nail on the head. Some of it is a bit name recognition or lack thereof in this case. I felt that was especially true. There was another album that I had in the top 10, Ryan Perry, High Risk,
I know you're
Low
a big
Reward.
fan on that one.
I'm a huge fan of this guy. And, you know, maybe this is me talking the album up because I loved it so much. But when we talk about traditional blues, and we spoke about the Grammys not too long ago, I could see this in a traditional blues category. The man is young. He has done, you know, work with his family band before, but he steps out on his own. He makes a great album. The title track, High Risk, Low Reward, is incredible. He does a great cover of Howlin' Wolf's Evil's Going On, which is awesome. I mean, the guy sounds a bit of the Howlin' Wolf sort of generation of singers where there's a lot of gravel in his voice, and he's a young man. So he's got nothing but great stuff ahead of him. You know, Hard Times is a song that closes the album. For him, I don't lose a lot of sleep over it because he's so young and he's so great at what he does that he will be on this top 20 list. And he will be on here. I would say, I'll call this right now, his next album will be in the top 20. I'm almost for certain that it will be. And the last band that I thought, I wouldn't call it a snub because I thought that it was marginal that they'd get a look. But there's a band out of Greece, a quartet they're called the Buzz Dealers. And they created an album called Blooming. The cover of the album says a lot about it. It's this bizarre psychedelic cover. And what they have done is they have tapped into the root of that early 70s psychedelia. They've got great crunching riffs, similar to the Heavy Eyes. They really take some risks. I mean, their songs are out there. They have some very interesting lyrics that I feel are a result of maybe a bit of Greek poetry, even just some not oddball, but lyrics that we would find, ooh, that's a striking lyric. So
Right.
I think that they didn't get snubbed because, like you said, there's so many choices. But I hope we hear from them again. I was sort of hoping they'd sneak in there. Any dark horses that missed out for you that you were sort of thinking that they might get in there?
Not as far as real dark horses, but I think the ones that I mentioned definitely, I think had a place, but it
Yeah.
didn't get on. And every year again, this happens every year. There's a few that just don't get in. That's kind of the nature of the game when you got 20. But Joe Bonamassa gets number one. And speaking of Joe Willie, he just put out a new documentary called Guitar Man, which pretty much chronicles his entire life and career up to this point.
Right.
What did you think of the documentary?
For the line that I'll put on it is I liked it. I liked it a lot. I didn't love it. I can't go out there and say that I'm calling everyone I know and say, hey, you got to see this. I did like it a lot, though. I thought it was well done. I feel that Joe does have an interesting tale to tell. I think that his origins in the middle of New York State are interesting. I personally, I know some things about Joe in his past before the movie. I thought it did a good job of highlighting a couple things that maybe you didn't know. I didn't really know the story, and I don't want to give too much away here, Pete, so stop me if I go down that route. But I thought sort of the disillusion of the band Bloodline, I thought the reason behind that was interesting. I didn't know.
I didn't know that either. I never really read the story on that. So that was something heading into the documentary I wanted to know more about, was that. And they did dive into that.
I think that's great. And then along those lines, his relationship with his producer, I believe it's Roy Weissman. Is that correct?
And it was interesting because they had mentioned that Roy didn't make any money with Joe for like over a decade.
Right.
Which is pretty crazy.
It's more than just pretty crazy. So I thought that the bond between the two of them was interesting. This goes beyond normal. Most people don't let something go that long.
No.
Right? I mean, especially because Roy Weissman has connections through his father, and he's good at what he does on his own. He doesn't need to stick around with someone just because he likes him, but he liked Joe enough. And it worked out. I didn't know that they had so much riding on the Albert Hall concert. I think for a lot of listeners and fans, we look at it now and we say, oh, of course Joe's played the Royal Albert Hall. Like, when's he going back? When's he doing this again? It doesn't.
But they basically bet the house on that show.
Yes. And right. I had no idea. So I think that there's a lot of great nuggets in there that speak to more about what really went on behind the scenes. The one thing where I didn't love it as much, Pete, is I would have liked to have heard more from other artists and people he's worked with on the music side. What was your takeaway? Did you like the way it was done? Did you learn a lot of stuff that you didn't know? What was your favorite moment?
I thought it was very well done. Production quality was very good. What you said, Willie, about hearing from more people, I kind of agree with that. It would have been nice to have more interviews with people outside of Joe's circle. Now, there's lots of interviews with Kevin Shirley, Joe's producer, his manager, right, Roy Weissman, his family, which was cool to see that.
Yeah.
But it would be nice to hear more interviews from people outside of Joe's circle that kind of talk about Joe's impact and how he's kind of affected the genre, and kind of go into that a little bit more. As far as Bloodline goes, we don't hear from any of the other members from Bloodline.
Right.
We just hear from Joe's side, I guess.
Right.
As far as Black Country Communion, we did get to hear from the other Black Country Communion band members.
I love that.
I was glad that they went into Black Country Communion and why that kind of just fizzled out, because Black Country Communion is such a great band, one of the best rock bands out there. And then it just kind of all of a sudden, something was going on and it kind of just fizzled out and it just stopped. So right. I was glad that they went into Black Country Communion. They had all the other band members and they talked about it. I thought it was kind of interesting that they did delve into Joe's personal life a little bit.
Yeah.
They had mentioned a relationship that he had with his girlfriend. He was going to move to Georgia, and basically they broke up, and that kind of inspired him to write the Ballad of John Henry album. And I thought that was interesting that he had this big breakup and then he goes on and writes what is, in my opinion, his best album. And then after that is really when his career skyrocketed. That, you know, they go play the Royal Albert Hall, they bet the house on it, Clapton comes, and then his career really takes off. So all in all, I like the documentary. I think they did a good job. My only critique would be just having a little bit more involvement, hearing from other people that aren't necessarily inside of Joe's circle.
Yeah, I think so. We agree on that. There could have been a little more of an expanse, but a couple of things I really did like, you know, my last couple of things I'd say that really stuck out in my mind was I liked how he spoke about the generations of the blues and blues rock. And he said, you know, I'm not even talking about the old post-war blues guys. Those are the guys that Clapton and Beck and Page were listening to. I'm now the generation that's part of those who come after, who are 2 generations removed, and keeping the blues alive. I thought that part was cool. I guess we give ratings to things, and for something like this, the rating that I would give can most easily be summed up in that at the end of the movie, I was excited about music.
Yeah.
I liked Joe Moore. I was, like you said, I was reminded about Black Country Communion. So I was listening to that for about 3 or 4 hours the following day. So I thought about Joe and his other albums. So pretty much on the yes or no, it's definitely a yes, because I left the movie being excited about Joe, about music, and just about music. Sorry, did I mention music? That I was excited about music?
Music is good. We like music.
All right, I figured you'd agree with that.
Especially music documentaries. We like music documentaries. All in all, solid documentary. Glad they made it.
Yeah.
You know, and it's nice that they can kind of use his platform, and hopefully, you know, more people discover Joe through this. It's on a lot of different platforms. It's on Amazon Prime, and hopefully that helps bring people in a little bit more and discover Joe's music, and then maybe it brings them into blues rock as a genre, and hopefully it's all good.
That's the goal.
All right, that's going to wrap up this week's edition of the Blues Rock Show. Make sure to hit that subscribe button and the notification bell to get all the latest videos. What did you think of the topics this week? What did you think of the top 20? Let us know down in the comments section below. But for now, he's Willie Witten. I'm Pete Francis. This is the Blues Rock Show. We'll see you next time.